Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Jeremy Winowitz will be here shortly. We got a couple questions in. We'll be getting started here in just a few moments. So thank you guys. And again, apologies on the link. We're just in the process of migrating stuff. So I'll go ahead and share this with you. Uh, cool. Yeah, and like I said, thank you guys for joining. We'll be getting here started here in just a few moments. I do believe I'm screen sharing. So again, Jeremy's going to be hosting today. Um, and we should ideally get started here in just the next couple of minutes. We did get Creighton, I got your question in line. We kind of been putting some eyes on it, and um, Wallem A. I know you've said it before. I believe it is A. Is it A or I?
Yes, it's A.
A.
Thanks.
Hey, yeah, no problem. And this is Robert. I don't know if it says it on my name, but we got your question as well. So those two questions we did get through on the front end. We were kind of been looking at them for the last couple minutes, last 30 minutes or so. But we'll get started here in just a moment. And again, apologies on the last minute link. We're just migrating systems right now, so our webinar is kind of in between links right now. All right, I think Jeremy's in here. I'm going to hand it over. Like I said, this is Rob on this side, but Jeremy's going to be the one hosting, but I'm going to be kind of back helping as well. So if people have questions, you feel free to put them in the chat. But Jeremy, whenever you are ready, I'll hand you the reins, and you can do the order of questions you want.
Yeah, sure. Can I share my screen instead of yours?
Yeah, sorry about that, man.
No, you're
Yeah.
fine. That was my fault for being a little bit late. Okay. All right. Again, as Robert already said, welcome everyone. So we got a couple questions. I'll start with A's because that was the one that I saw had seen first. And so there's a little bit to this, so I'll read what the question kind of was out loud, so anyone watching this back or those that are in the call can kind of have an idea of what this question is focusing on. But essentially, uh, we're looking at AO's asking for guidance on setting up forms with two fields, for example, a city and a country. And on the form, the city list should be populated when the relevant country is selected. So basically, dependent dropdowns. If I choose this country, then I want the other dropdown to display the cities that relate to that particular country, with the concept of kind of figuring out how to actually populate those items. We discussed this in a lunch and learn on June 13th, but it kind of was a little bit more, uh, I guess, simplified for what your actual use case or thought process was. And the biggest reason being, if you have a larger number of countries that you want to have in that dependent dropdown in the initial dropdown box, then it makes the use case that we gave or the example that we gave in the past becomes a lot more complex. Um, Especially also when there's a ton of cities to consider. And so the idea here is we're looking to discuss if you can, add a table as like a CSV or maybe in a defined data structure, and then the flow can feed into the city field as a list of cities whenever a country is selected. And then you can also autofill and search or whatever to find the city easier. Hoping to find maybe something a little bit less messy than the sample that we discussed previously. And so I have a couple questions, I think, for you, A, since you're here. to maybe just clarify this as much as possible, to kind of hopefully give you at least the right direction to go in for some things that we can check. And that I think the biggest question that I have is this like CSV that you're expecting to use, is it expected that this is going to change a lot and have like new items added to it, or is it going to be mostly constant?
Um, Over time it could change, but it won't be changing like day to day kind of thing.
Okay,
So this, if you're thinking about categories, then most of the categories will remain the same. But maybe next year we might have to add a couple more or remove a couple more, depending on what kind of category the main, the column could be.
right. Okay, good. So yeah, 'cause I think that's the biggest thing in thinking or considering this is if it's more the more complex it is and the more we need to consider, scalability and making it all have to be like dynamic, the more complex this gets for sure. Whereas if it can be more constant and then you know the places that you have to make changes if you do have additions, then that kind of helps. Um, I think one of the easier ways to at least start to get organized, especially if you have your data in a CSV, like the one that you provided in the email when you asked this question, is like something like a CSV object mapping. If you set up some kind of data structure to hold it, it doesn't have to be like a database structure, even if it's just a simple, flow structure so that it can hold it while the flow is running. That's one thing that may be useful. And may kind of help get the ball rolling at least a little bit. So I did this real quick a little bit ago, but I just created a simple flow structure. I just called it sample structure that has country and city as its two like pieces of data here. And so if I were to build out what you had with some kind of file, whether that comes from, I'm just going to do a constant since I have it here, or wherever that's coming from. You pull the file into this, and then you can set up the item mapping editor to then map the fields from that CSV into this item. And so if I build data, I can say, well, field one has all my countries and field two has all my cities. Now, when I run this, it'll kind of sort those and place them in the flow structure. So then for one, now I have something that's a little bit easier to, oh, I forgot to mark it as ignore the first line. But after this, right, it's a little bit easier to ingest now because everything's kind of linked together with the city and the country that it belongs with. Um, so from here, you can then start kind of sorting things out and building your lists. This is if you need this to be like the most dynamic you can get it is, after you pass this in, then you can start to build logic that would say like, if it's USA, I want to create a list of all those cities. And then, as we get to another country, then you'd build more logic to kind of check that. Say, oh, if the country is UK, then I can start building a list of all the UK cities and so on and so forth. It definitely becomes more complex if you're trying to keep it really dynamic because you'd have to consider, you'd have to have rules or something like that to check each of these things before you can add them to the list. And then from there, it kind of becomes, a little bit tougher to keep track of, right? Something like a rule collection filter could be used to then start to sort these. That's one way you can start to sort them. Um, that's kind of designed to take in a list of items and then you write a rule that would like sort those values based on the items. So I could take these and then I could write a rule to say if the country is USA, then it'll output a list of all the cities that have USA in it. So then it could output that the strings that would be all of the cities and everything like that. Um, that's like one way that this could be done. But as you do that, you kind of have to keep that in mind, like keep in mind to like this is one rule collection filter for one city, right? Or one country. I mean, and so then I'd have to kind of consider, the more countries that I have, the more filters I'd have to create to kind of assess that. So it gets a little complex there. But another alternative that I like that I was considering and thinking about is concept of a truth table as well. Because that you could do something similar, but you could have, your values in your truth table. Um, you could set up the input to take in your data structure and have the values in your truth table be, the city or the countries, USA, UK, France, whatever, going down this list and say like, if it is this, then I can output, the value, or I can even have this allow actions, and those actions can be to add to a list. So then I could use that to like assess each row and say like, oh, for each of these items, assess what the country is, and then based on the country, add to a list. So then I can start building lists of each of my countries. Um, and then from there you'd have now like lists of these cities that you could then use to pass into your uh, to pass into your form from there. But a lot of it is coming down to like figuring out how exactly you want to gather the information so that you can send it into the form. Um, like we described in the previous one. So then you can set it up to take so that your form can take in those values and then pass that information in. Um, and one other thing, I don't have an example form here. So then if we're talking about like the form, like we had discussed in the previous lunch and learn, right? You have your drop downs, one with country, one with city. Your country, you could uh, you could grab your country from something from your like if you have data, you can just pass that item in to here so that you can populate it with your list of all of your countries. Since if you built out the flow like I've been kind of sharing, right? You can just pull that list of countries from your data structure and then send it into this list if you would like. That's one way you could do this. And then same with your cities, right? If you spent the time to create the logic to build out those cities by using rule collection filters or truth tables to build out those lists, then you can just, you can kind of pull from that from here. And when you have those lists, the other option then that I was thinking, if this is, if it makes sense to make it more, if it can be more constant with just maybe some minor changes here and there, if you don't need to do that, then a lot of that building may be unnecessary. If it's okay enough to just simply have this be a static list, and I know this may initially be a large list, right? But if it's a large list of things like USA, UK, France, Germany, whatever, right? The initial time you do this, sure, this may be a static list, and you can always come back and add to this list if you would like. That part is maybe not that bad, especially if there's not too many countries to deal with here. For your city, I had an idea that would make it better than the initial the way that we kind of discussed this in the past. If I can just pull this up real quick. In the previous lunch and learn, the example that we showed was we had a country, with a static list of some things, and then here we built a flow, and on that flow, um, we used a string match step, right? And I think this is the main thing that you said, would become more complex, right? In our
Right.
example, we had three things, right? You were saying, oh, USA, France, and UK. Oops, I didn't do that. Separate lines. USA, France, and UK, right? That creates three lines. But obviously, you add more things here, it's going to create a ton of lines. That makes this a lot more complex and annoying to deal with. So if you're okay with doing the constants, which would definitely be a little easier on the initial setup, you can just do the constants. But I think a truth table will actually work very well here. in this particular case, because you can set the truth table to check just for the country and say if the country is USA, then and then have a static like a list of all of your cities that are that kind of fit in this thing. So let me like if I set this up to take and this can just be that's all I really need, right? If I take my country and say country equals USA, for example, and then here this can just be it can output a list of strings. So if I output a list of strings, I can set the list of strings up here. I'm just going to put 2 cities in here just for reference real quick, right? It'll output a list of strings for USA. And then, if I do the same thing for, another country, um, or whatever, like, then this should say, like, I should be able to have this output. If it's USA, it's going to output all of the cities that I have in the USA. And it'll output like just the result. I can have it also, yeah, where is it? Not all matches, but first match only. So then, right, it'll hit USA and then it'll output a list of all of USA's cities. And I can use that to populate that drop down. And then, if it's France, it'll output all of France's cities. And I can use that to populate the drop down. So then here now it's only one path. There's still going to be a little bit of configuration, obviously, and the fact that you have to set up these, all
Yeah,
of the
that's what
cities
I
and
was
stuff.
wondering. Instead of, so this could come from a flow, right?
Yes.
Like if
Yeah,
I have
like
like a
I'm
big,
using constant as an example, but I can pull it from the flow. If I built the list of my cities somewhere because I pulled that from the CSV or something like that, I can pass that in from here as well. And then I don't have to manually type that in every time.
okay, so I'm thinking, um, so if I can set up a flow that parts out according to the country and it just gives you the list, I
Mhm.
can feed it in here, right?
Yeah, and then you can just pull from it in this truth table, and then the truth table will now only have one output instead of that string match that will give you a ton of different like
Mhm.
outputs. But all of these, no matter which part of the truth table it'll go through, will contain the proper list. And so then you can just have that proper list go to your end and
And this
populate the
will
dropdown.
and this will be the data input for my form, the second drop down. Do
Yeah,
I?
correct. Like this one you need to come from your
Okay.
your initial drop, like your first
Yeah.
drop down. So
Okay.
the input will be from your first drop down, and then that'll be what goes into the truth table here. And then it'll assess that and then output your list of all of your cities from it to
Okay.
populate the second drop down.
And now, because I'm so new to this, how does that connect to when the first drop down is selected? It calls up this data. How is that done through the active form flow, or like if I select USA, it only shows the cities in the USA? How is that talking between the two drop down fields?
Um,
Am
Robert,
I
I know you've done this more than I have with I know with active form flows, but this is a little different because I know before you set this up with the input source from the flow. Is
Mhm.
that just directly from the output of this, as long as that's an input, it'll work? Or did you have to set up an active form flow also to do that?
I do believe I ran active form flow for that particular use case, if I'm remembering correctly. The I'm trying to think here. Yeah, I almost certainly, when I've done it, used active form flows and set control value.
Okay.
Um, that set control value, I do believe, is an option in that flow for the city, but you would need some type of
You need
Yeah,
to like trigger it to actually send the data though to the
right,
flow.
right.
So okay, so then that was what I kind of thought at first, but I just want to make sure. So yeah, so if you want to actually send the data, you'd set up an active form flow, which you can access just from your main properties, not a property within one of the controls here, but just
Mhm.
like the main properties here, you can set up your active form flows, and then you can trigger it based on the selection of your country drop down.
Okay, so
And
it would
then
be something like set control value or something like that. If this
yeah,
selected, and it would tell that second drop down to parse out the data according to the selection, right?
correct. Yeah, and that would just be the logic you'd have to kind of test
Yeah,
with a little bit.
yeah. Okay. Um, now if I have a super huge list, like I do, like currently I have like almost 300 cities per country.
Hmm.
Is there so right now we're filtering the list to build on top of, I think in the first demo you guys said like if you just start typing like the first three letters or three characters, it started autofilling or suggesting stuff.
Hmm.
How do I connect to that? Is that going to be in the active form flow? Once it's selected, you do filter additionally to populate this, or how does that work?
It should just automatically allow you to do that. So a drop down by itself, unless you turn off the ability to do that, which I'm sure you can, but I think uh like by default you can you can type into a drop down list. And so
And
the
if I
drop down
started,
will like be populated with all the values based on the country you chose. So let's say
uh-huh,
we chose USA. Now every option of a USA city will be in this drop down. And
uh-huh.
as soon as I start typing, it will give me suggestions. That's by default in decisions on a drop down.
Oh, okay,
It'll give
okay,
me suggestions based on what's currently in the options available in the drop down.
okay. If I start
So
typing, I don't know, as St. Louis, it would show up St. Louis and St.
yeah.
something, St. something. Okay,
Yeah. You type in Saint, it should show you it should start to show you all of the cities that start with ST, basically.
okay, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that it was default.
Yeah, that's
Um,
default.
okay. One more question before I know I don't want to hog up all the time. So, when I was testing it, I just created like a defined data structure between those two columns. So I should be able to call from that data structure to create that list that flow into that truth table, right? I just
Hmm.
did figure out the logic from
Correct. Yeah.
that. Okay.
And you'll need
Okay.
to define that structure as an input on that as well. So like when you are populating with that active form flow, or running the truth table in the active form flow, depending on how you're populating it, but in that truth table itself, it gives you options for input. And say your structure is called city state list, you would need to
Uh-huh.
make sure in order to get that drop down in your truth table that you would specify that as an input because by default it's just not going to show up.
Okay.
So you specify that as an input, and then outside of that object, you can map it in however you want. You could filter out ahead of time. You can get to get that data from the CSV. Like if you
Uh-huh.
got a CSV with 300 cities on it, you
Uh-huh.
can implement that CSV to object mapping, and then that'll give you an output that you can map in. But you still need like it will not by default just give you an option. You'll have to just actually hard map it in, not
Yeah.
hard map it in, but specify it.
Specify. Yeah. So, because I was testing, I've already done that. I dropped the CSV, created the defined data structure. So there is a database, already there. I just didn't know how to connect those dots. Like then now you have a different data type that's not string, so it's got conflict. But I'll figure it out. Okay. Um,
What is the data
okay.
type if it's not a string? What is the data?
Well, because I
It's a
created
structure.
yeah, data structure. So now it's like a record, right?
Yeah.
Now it's its own data type. So when I'm saying input, yeah, there's something I'm missing in connecting the thing. I don't know if I'm making it more complicated than necessary.
With
Um,
within that structure, you should be able to parse down into like a value or something along those lines. If we go into a truth
okay,
table, you can
Yeah.
also
Like I'll
you
show
could
you. So I have this I have my sample data structure that I've created, right? It's a data structure. So if I just use this data structure, if I try to pull from it with like an item here, if I just pick this and I try to use the rules, it gives me very limited options because it's a complex data type. So there's not a lot I can do with the rules, but I can always drill further down into that data structure and
Mm,
specify like more what I'm
okay.
looking for. So rather than looking across the whole data structure, I only care about the country for this rule. Well,
Uh-huh.
now it's going to give me rules that are based on strings.
Okay,
And so
good.
then I have a much larger list to work with.
Okay, okay. Thank you. This is helpful.
Yeah, and you can change. Can you show her one more? I mean, not that this doesn't necessarily apply, but on default output data, not that you would need it for your particular use case, but if you hover over the pencil, you can change the structure in which you're outputting that data to. So
Oh,
depending on what you're
Yeah.
doing,
It doesn't
that
just
can
have
be
to be a
useful.
string.
Right.
I
You
can
can
also
output.
output,
could be
I
a
can
bit.
output my sample data structure, like the
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
whole entire complex data structure if I want.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Right. All right. With that, we will move on to Creighton. So Creighton also submitted a question, and just as a note for anyone else that's still in here, if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we can get to them once we're done with Creighton, because Creighton is the last pre-submitted question we had. So feel free to post them in the chat, and we can get to them once we finish this next question. Okay, Creighton's question is, quick look here. I'm looking for guidance on creating a truth table that will change the value on a data structure using logic based on the month. So we got a structure with data members of it with brand, ship date, estimated receivable date, stuff like that. I would like insight on logic that can find the 20th day of the coming month or um, or this current month if it's before the 20th. Calculate 3 weeks from that day. So as a practical example, someone ships every month on the 20th. We want to get an expected date of receiving that shipment. Got it. Okay, so if it's the 10th of July, it'll be 3 weeks past the 20th of July. If it's July 21st, it'll find 3 weeks past August 20th. Using a truth
And,
table with enabled actions to change the value in the structure.
and Jeremy, I have a kind of a partial build. If you want me to take over screen share, I just maybe want it. 'Cause I know you have more knowledge than me on certain things. I can kind of lead this one, and then if you want to just chirp in when something comes to you.
Yeah, sure, that sounds
Just
good.
because we worked on it, and for those of you, Creighton came to the ESC stand up and we talked about it a bit in there, so that's why I kind of already have a build on it, or at least a loose build. But conceptually, um, I was thinking something along the lines. I think we tried too many versions here. I got to figure out where it is. But in the flow, my initial logic was to place some type of rule that decides, create a rule. We'll just say right now that figures out whether we are before or after the 20th. And then on this rule, statement rule, we'll just create something really quick here because I guess I don't know where my build is. And I'm just using arbitrary data here just for a moment, just to get to the actual building here.
Yeah, Robert,
Um,
real quick, and then
yeah,
just
man.
to confirm, we're using a defined data structure. So I know you asked about that. That's the type of data structure that is in our flow, the apparently defined data structure, if that makes sense.
Yeah, man. So we'll just call it vendor as a vendor. Geez, vendor as a string. We'll do ship date just for simplicity.
And then we call it like ERD date, like when it's like expected receipt date. So
Cool.
ERD date, vendor ship date. Yeah.
And we'll just call this date time now for now. Uh, Something along these lines. And this was my initial logic was having an action off of a truth table. So when a truth table comes in, it'll say, hey, which vendor is it, whether it's Nike, Adidas, whatever, and then it would run a flow after it, creating a rule that would decide whether or not we were at the 20th day. So we can create a new statement rule, uh, day decider. I don't know. Kind of trying to go as quick as I can here. My input data, I'll use that your structure that we just made, and we'll call it, we'll just say the same thing for now. And we could say if the ship date, I guess we could just do day. Yeah, day is less than 20. We get two paths here once we save this. So if the day is less than 20, we're going to find the 20th day and add 3, getting a difference in days kind of thing. And then on the false path, the route that I kind of stumbled into was here under data, under dates. You can utilize which, and if creating one of these jumps out at you for the one we did, I'm trying to remember. I know we definitely used get difference in days at one point, but uh
We
oh,
get
add
next
days.
month, start, end date, and add days.
Oh, get next month. That's it. Yeah, this one.
And then there was like add days after that.
Yeah. So something along these lines that if it's not the path, we'll get the month start and end date, and that'll give us the start date of the month. We can just ignore this. And then I was going to add that day, the source date from this, which we just called start date. And we were going to add 20 days to get a new value. And then from there, we could add 3 weeks. Um, I don't know if we are given that option. If we can, I'll just add days from just for simplicity to keep building. But the source
At
date
that point, you might
is
as well just add 41 days to the first one. I mean, that's
true,
a very
true,
minor
true. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah,
so just to clarify on that there, basically what we would be doing again is if it's like if it's not the 20th or whatever, that's 30-day window, shipment window that they would have. So you're basically going to take it goes to the 20th and then put 30 days out to determine the ERD. The 3 weeks thing was all like, I think there might be some confusion there. That was just what we're currently doing is we're looking at basically what the current ERD date is, and then we're going 3 weeks in the future and just doing that across every vendor. But what we're trying to do here is be vendor specific so that we're saying that, yeah, Nike only ships on the 20th and having that information, they only ship on the 20th, find what the closest 20th is. So today, right now, I mean, the closest would be 720. And
mhm.
then based on that 720, add 30 days. And then that's when we're expecting to receive the product in from them. ERD date.
Yeah. So 30 plus 20 would be 50 here for this particular path, the Nike path, right? So it's the first day of the month, and then we add 20 plus 30 gets us to 50 days.
Okay, so you can't with the get next month start end date, you can't just say like the 20th there. It's just that will go to July 1st, and then you have to add 50, which would then because you go 20 and then plus the additional 30, so that'd be 50. Is that what you're saying?
That was some of the
yes.
logic for Jeremy. I was
Okay.
asking, yeah, because I didn't know if there was a way to specify like specific day, get multi. There's just a lot of date stuff here.
Yeah, no, that
No,
makes sense. That
yeah,
makes sense.
I believe you can only pinpoint onto the first or the last day of months.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so then you could add 50 days, and then you could get that output data to use change value on your truth table to change the value of that ERD date. Um, so that you change the ERD date to whatever this output is. So it'll go down this path. If it goes to the true path, let's think if it's true, if it's less, so if it's less than, we need to figure out how to get to probably get difference in days. Maybe like what would the logic do you think there for this path there, Jamie, to get the 20th easily? To get the 20th day, is there a way to constant like day of month or something? Let's just search for
Well,
it from.
that would just be in the like the output, right? Because it's the same thing that you're assessing right on your get day on your like day decider rule. right? It's just because you can grab the value from something like my mind's not working, right? It's in your it's in the day, right? Ship date. The ship date has the value of day. That's what that number is holding that value right there.
Right.
Your ship date day has that number. That's going to be, if it runs down that true path, it's going to be a number from 1 to 20.
30.
So
Yeah.
you
True.
would use that. You would
To
use that same exact number
number
in your further logic.
to get to
So would you
20
do
somehow.
would we do the add days then? Would that be the next step and you just do 20 or it will now
Well,
because if it's
the
less than
problem
20,
is,
then
yeah,
you
you
don't
don't
know how
know
many less than
exactly how
20.
many exactly. You would need to get that number and then figure out what to add from there.
I'm trying to, there's a, Jeremy, do you remember the step? I did a lunch and learn when I first started these months and months ago, where you can custom make a formula where you have it gives you the solution and then you can type in one variable and it'll find the previous one. I can find it. Let me search to my Slack.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Oh, here we go. The one that I'm thinking of is called.
So just so I understand this correctly too, Jeremy, like with the like it's the roll day deciders looking at the 20th. So it's going to look at the start, like the start ship date basically. And it's going to say if it's less than 20, then this is the step we're building out right now. However, if it's 21, then it's going to go to the next month. It's going to add the 50 days and then it's going to give us the ERD date as
Oh,
that.
this is
So
it.
like that's why we need to, yeah,
Yes.
okay. But yeah, this part's a little trickier because you have to still look at the start date. And if it's, let's say it's 18, like now we need to tell it that it needs to add 2 to it and actually say 20.
Well, um, you're just the goal is just to output the date that is the expected.
We need to
Yes.
input, like we need to adjust what the start ship date is going to be. Because say like right now, we're not saying that everything Nike needs to go on the 20th. We don't really have a way to do that. So that's what we're trying to do with this here is to say whatever start ship date is showing in the system, we need it to be the 20th because they're going to ship on the 20th. No matter what happens, they're shipping the 20th of the month. But then based on that, we need to add the time to that to say they have 30 days to ship. And then the ERD date will be 20th plus 30 equals whatever that is. Say that is the ERD date. Right now, we're getting everything. Like we'll have like 7/4 for like ship date for Nike, and we know that they're not going to ship until 7/20. So like we need to adjust that and account for the fact that they're not going to ship until the 20th because they only ship on the 20th.
Right.
We have we have other vendors that do stuff too, or like they might only ship on the 14th, but they might only ship on like a Tuesday. So like eventually this is going to be built more that it's not just like a Nike 20th type thing. And that's why going through the truth table, you're able to kind of adjust specifically vendor specific, you know?
Hmm.
I'm gonna go over to the truth table, make sure I have guess I probably didn't save either of these, did I? All right. So we're saying,
Okay, I've got something. I think I actually have something that's less complex than this.
okay, all right, you want me to
Or
stop?
just in the logic of the flow.
Oh, go
I
into that
mean, I
flow.
can just tell you what to, yeah, go back to the flow. Rather than worrying about dynamic expression, whatever stuff,
Sure.
right? It's still going to be if it's still going to be like the same consistent date, um, you can use the get previous month start end date,
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
right?
funny.
But
And
Yeah.
the
add
only problem
20.
is that will get the previous month, so it will not get the current month. There is no step that does that, but you can also just use the add months step to just add 1 month, and then that'll take it to the current month. Slightly annoying workaround, but that'll just get the previous month, then it'll
So
add 1 month. So do the add months step.
add moths. Add
Right.
moths,
And
and
then you add
then
1 month, because then that'll take it back to,
That would just be constant, right? Constant 1 month.
yep. Source date will come from the start date from the previous step.
and
And
then
then
we add
from there
20
you can
days.
add your days.
And add days of 20, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Or 50 to account for getting
So
it to the
and then
20th
this
and then
can
getting it.
be followed whatever days. I mean, they have no,
You're cutting out real bad, Craig.
no.
Yeah, you're still cutting
Can you?
out.
Okay, sorry. What's going on? I mean,
Yeah, I like that. That's good logic there, Jeremy.
Yeah.
can you
So
hear me,
then
Robert? Am I
I can hear you
still
now.
cutting out?
Nope, you can
Okay,
hear. You sound
good.
great now.
Okay. So now what I'm saying is like literally this specific flow structure can be followed for any other type of suppliers. I mean,
Hmm.
if they ship on the 14th, I'd just add 14 days for the top part of the truth, right? I'd just add
Yeah.
14. But are we saying then to like change the start ship date to the 20th? Like, is that doing that in here? Like, or
You would take this output and then use it to change the value. So in here,
okay.
you should be able to. I'm trying to think here. So it runs this flow. What do you think, Jeremy? Like maybe a create data and then use change
Click
value?
edit. You click
That
edit,
takes you
it
takes
just
you back
takes you
into
right
the
to the
flow.
flow.
What about a create data and change value?
Yeah, that might be. Yeah, and then you can have a change value of whatever item you want
So then that would be
to
like the
have that date go
start
into.
ship date. Yeah, it would be start date, I guess we called it, right?
Yeah, but how would I expose that without building data? Oh, expose properties. Yep, expose properties and then change value of the ship date. Name these outputs the same. So that no matter which path it takes, we're outputting add days. We're outputting add days. And then in here, we can change the value of the ship date to our add days. And it should change the value within that.
No, that's
Uh,
changing the value of add days. That's not changing the
oh,
value of the
okay, okay,
ship
okay.
date. The inputs would be add days instead of constant.
Ship date would be what would we select for the output though? And Creighton, this might just be something I have to mess with across the next couple of days. I mean, it's just one
Yeah,
of
that's
those.
fun. I mean, I again, today was the first day of brainstorming. I have like a 2 week timeline for it. But yeah, again, like we would want the ship day to be 20, which it looks like it is doing with that there. But then again, to get the ERD date, you'd have to figure in the 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 time. What the heck did I call it? The shipment window. So like that we could understand like when we're expecting to receive it, you know? So
Yeah.
basically this whole process is just we need to whatever we're seeing, we need to say, okay, we don't care what we're currently seeing. We know that this vendor ships on the 20th, so let's change the start ship to the 20th. And then let's change the ERD to 20 plus shipment window, which is 30, which would be like we had down there like 50, but that output would be ERD and not start ship. So yeah, there's you know what I mean? Like we would need to change value not only on the start ship date, we'd also need to know what the expected receipt date is after we're changing the start ship date to the 20th of the month. So that's where I'm still a little bit confused on how we're gonna execute that. Where it's like the top part looks good, the truth part, because it's like, okay, you're gonna do this, you're gonna go back to last month, you're gonna add the days, you add the month, right? So now it's like this month, you're gonna add 20 and then say that's the shipment. But like then we'd also want to say that it's got expected to the ERD date is based on that 30 days. So it would be 30 days from the start ship, build logic like that. So it's
Yeah,
like a little complex. So
for
yeah,
sure.
again, I didn't
Um,
think we'd be able to get it all figured out in the lunch and learn here, but
I sent
definitely
you I sent you some text in the chat. Just trying to get you the path of least resistance towards like actual support. Another thing that might help is if you could check, typed it out for you too, but if you check with your lead, whoever in your organization to see, because your organization, DSG, might have like PS or like support like wrapped into y'all's what the interaction with our organization. And if you do, you'll have more dedicated help because we definitely can help and I can put my brain on it. But if you are utilizing those services, like you'll have someone dedicated that can help you build because we kind of get locked into I'll squeeze you in when I can, but we kind of spend a lot of our time doing training, like the training stand-ups and lunch and learn and making sure the containers are up or putting them, creating new ones and stuff like that, where you might have more dedicated time through support. Support is also a free service, but they're not going to be able to build a huge solution for you, but they can give you insight. But I just want to make sure you know that you have other resources outside of our team.
gotcha. Yeah, no
All right.
problem. I mean, I think for today, this was definitely a good starting point there. I mean, I can't really go in, I guess, and fool around with this instance, which I wish I could, but I don't really think I can do that. So I just took a screenshot of it. I know that I'm gonna have to like set the inputs and everything, but that's probably down the road when I'm actually
Are
doing it with our real data,
are
right?
you in
Like
8 or are you in 9? Version 8 or in version 9, like your instance? Is it
I
is it
haven't
blue like this?
updated it, so I
It's orange.
think it's orange still.
Yeah, I might be able to build something out and send you an email today.
Okay.
So you
I
don't.
mean, again, if it's not today and it's like tomorrow, and I mean, I'm gonna fool around with a few things here, see if I like makes sense kind of how you did it. I think that theoretically it makes sense, right? We're gonna have to create a role, and that role is based on like a truth table. And then out of that truth table, each is gonna it's a truth table, and then you're creating the role in the subflow. And then it's following this process. And then based on the different roles we have, it will be different for each vendor, right? And then if it's not in the vendor list, we just completely bypass this and you check that bottom at the bottom of the truth table to basically say if it's not on here, just continue on with the flow. So I mean, it does seem extremely complex, but I think you put a lot of good options out here on some of the steps to follow, at least. And that's what I was
Yeah.
looking for really today. I wasn't looking to solve, Rome wasn't built in a day. So I wasn't expecting this to be, just completed today. But I think that just through talking through this, it's been really helpful. So with that being said, I will allow others on the line to be able to go through stuff. And thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Robert, for your help on this here.
No problem, man. Yeah, we'll we'll
Thank you.
uh, we'll get back with you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. And we got one more question for Julia. Sorry, that took a little while, Julia. We can start to look at your question now. You said we have a process where the user uploads an Excel spreadsheet and the flow validates the data inside it. One of the columns is of the date type, and I want to build a rule that checks if the data in the Excel sheet is of the date time type. How can I build a rule to perform this validation? If you would, just care to just briefly elaborate, what are you using to grab your Excel, and then, or like, I guess, what are you trying to right now with this?
Yeah, hi Jeremy. So what's going on is we built a flow that the user uploads a spreadsheet Excel, and we built the flow extension data for each column. So for that column specifically, that is date type, we have the data structure for this column, okay? And then using this data, I want to check if the user put the right type in it. So I want to make sure that it's date that they inserted, not like number or text. You know what I mean?
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
So that's the rule I want to build, just to make sure that what the user inserted in the cell, it's date and not anything else.
Got it. Okay. And have you played around with this at all or tried anything yet, or are you just kind of trying to brainstorm?
I'm really in the beginner of decisions, like my
Okay.
third week using it. But this is one thing that I was asked for to do it, and I tried to do, but in the rule, the verb, I couldn't find anything that I could use to identify the format.
Right. Let's start. That's not really what I want. You said you're getting it from, they're like supplying it on a form or something, and it's
Yeah,
outputting data from it. Okay.
yeah, they are uploading on a form.
Let me just try to build it quick. Quick. It's just a file upload on the form.
Yeah. Right.
Grab it. File. Probably. Actually, is that so? Is it outputting file data like this, or did you do anything else with it before to get more
Mm,
information on it? Do
Let
you
me
know?
think. I believe that for the flow captures each column and stores the data. Does that make sense?
think I just have that's what I want. Then I can check the data rows. Okay. So I got a file. I'm going to upload an Excel file, and then I'm going to convert it to dynamic data rows because this will allow me to just look at the values inside a row.
Yeah.
And then that I can actually choose that here because this will output dynamic data row. And I can set that as an input. That's back up here. Okay. So if I'm listing out the list of all the items, I could do a for each if I needed to look at one at a time. Then from here, I could actually look at, you'd have to choose the field that you know is like whichever column has dates in it, or
Yeah.
that you're hoping has dates in it, and pick that one. And then you would want, there actually should be an is date like Boolean from there. So if you convert the Excel to data rows, the
Yeah.
data rows actually has a value to check if it's a date.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
like, and if I, let's say I make this not a list, so it looks a little easier to see. So then I can pick, the data rows. Let's just say it's the first column in my item. I can say is date. And so now this rule should just be checking and saying if it is a date. So is it a date? Is it true? That might do it. You can also just look at there's different things you can like if that doesn't work, right? I think that's the first thing to check, because it should kind of note that is like should mark it whether or not it's a date. But if that doesn't work, you can try messing with some of these other options. You can actually look at the value, if there's a number value or if it's a text value and stuff like that, and go from there. But I think this should do exactly what you're looking for. Check is date. Obviously, we want it to be true. So if it is a date, then it'll go down the true path of this rule. And
So
if it's
for
not a
the
date, it'll go down the false path of this rule.
okay, for the given input for the rule, what is it?
So I chose dynamic data rows because that's what the output is. So I can basically just say, I don't want to check it just for one item. I would want to check like for each. So there's actually a step that specifically is for each Excel or CSV row. So actually, I don't even need this first one. I can use this step and I'll say, okay, so they upload the file and then take the output of that and it'll go into this for each Excel or CSV row here.
Yeah.
And then I'll say, okay, so once it grabs the row, I want you to run this rule. And then this is outputting the whatever row that it's looking at, each one at a time. So then my rule, if I set it to be the input being dynamic data row, that specific data type, then I can pass the current row into it.
Okay.
And so then my rule is going to be checking the data, that dynamic data row, check if the is date is true. And then from there, you can do what you want. This is a loop, so you always want to make sure, whichever path, like let's say, whatever you want to do with it after it's true or false, you always want to make sure that these are going back into the step because it is meant to be a loop so that it can check the next row each time. But otherwise, and then, you can add whatever logic on these paths that you want to do with that data, so that it can check the rest.
Is it possible to, in the rule, the given input, I choose date time. Is it possible to do with that? The
Oh, so like
given input.
date in like specifically date instead of date time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
date time type of data. So the given inputs, instead of dynamic data roles, I put date time, you know?
oh, got it. So you're talking about like up here.
Yeah.
You're saying if I choose date time here,
Yeah.
then you could, so then I could pull date time. I just called it. If you want to go further into it, not if otherwise you can just use date time, and then you should have a set of options from here. Um, yeah, exists isn't going to do a whole lot because it'll exist even if it's not. Although this might be okay because it might throw an error or it might appear as null if it's not a date time at all.
Okay.
That might just take some testing. So exists might work. Otherwise, the other options here are like looking for, if it is a date time, what about the date time? And it's more
Yeah.
specific, not like whether or not it is a date time.
Yeah. If you use the exists, what you put next?
It won't actually make you do another one.
Oh, okay.
It just says, okay, date time exists. And if it does,
Oh,
then you can try that. Again, now
perfect.
that might require some testing because I don't know if sometimes even like certain values, even if it's not like not what you're looking for, it may think that it exists.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
you that'll take a testing to see if that'll work. But
Okay.
there's
Yeah,
a
I
couple
can
things to
try
try for you.
this couple. Thanks. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course, no problem. All right. Well, that'll end our time for lunch and learn. So thank you for everyone that's watching and those that are watching on YouTube. Just real quick, if you need anything, you can always check out our solutions marketplace with this QR code here, or you can check out our decision support YouTube channel to find all the lunch and learn content as well as other videos with useful knowledge that we'll post up there pretty often. So you can always check those things out. Thank you for all that joined and asked questions. Thank you, Robert, for assisting, and we will see you all next week.
See ya.